So we'll go ahead and get started. And let's start with prayer. In the name of the Father, and the Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Lord, we thank you for today. We thank you for yet another opportunity to give you glory through all that we do. We ask your blessing upon each of us, our families. And in a special way, we ask your blessing upon the teens and our small groups. Give us the heart and the skills and the words to reach them so that we might draw them closer into relationship with you. We ask this as we pray together. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. All right. This next session is one of my favorites to teach about. But before we get into that, I'd like to just take a couple minutes to kind of check in and see how things went this past time. So just it was kind of a lot of getting to know your group, and I know I've gotten to talk to a couple of you all about different dynamics in your group, but just overall feedback on how things went.
A lot of material.
A lot of material
to go over.
Yeah.
It seemed like unless you moved according to the time frame, you really couldn't get it all in.
Okay.
So.
Yeah. And I will go ahead and warn you that that's probably the case going forward, and I don't mean that to scare you. I just say that because we put more in here than you necessarily have to get completely through. There's gonna be things in here that resonate more with your kids, and just like these trainings, I'm gonna give you more information than what's actually just written here as well, to kind of give you more of a background. And then from this, then you know, hey, these points are really going to resonate with my kids, and I need to spend some time here. So if you need to adjust that, feel free to do so. Okay, good. I don't want it to be.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be the letter of the law.
Right.
Everything's
Yeah.
going to be touched.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So great.
I'm hoping as they go on, they get more comfortable talking, because it was so quiet. I mean, there wasn't a lot of response. So, I mean, if you would always respond, but it's like you're waiting for other people to open up, and it just didn't happen quite yet last week. I don't know if everybody else.
I'll change my class. Mine was insane. They were totally engaged and a little bit on the obnoxious, rambunctious side, but I work well with that. That's fine with me. But I was really surprised at how much they already knew. And if I had to say, okay, these kids are ready for confirmation, they are. I mean, they knew what to talk about, they knew how to talk about it, and it was so funny because they all seemed to kind of work with each other, even though they didn't all know each other. So it was really cool. I really enjoyed it. We got through all the material with like nothing to spare. I mean, it was crazy, but there was one section where they wanted to take off with it, and I let them.
Yeah.
And then there was another section that was supposed to take longer that they didn't want to, just didn't go.
Want any pointers then?
So well.
Well, I really told them at the beginning of the class. I said, this is something or a class that we're gonna be talking about things that probably we don't need to share outside of this room, and so what's said in the room stays in the room. And of course, Colleen Beckman was with me, and she reiterated it, and they were like, "Okay, we're cool." And man, they just poured on it. It was great. Yeah, they were.
So there are lots of different group dynamics and that you're going to run into. And no two groups are going to be the same. So like if people come back talking about their group, or it was, we had a great conversation this week, and this week we didn't, it may flop in that very next week for you. But just kind of a few general kind of things. If you have a group of what we'll sometimes call wallflowers, right? They're just happy to be there and be present and look on. A lot of times, just engaging them by name, just calling somebody, hey, what do you think, Sarah? What do you think? What do you think, John? sometimes they need permission to speak. So some kids feel that need to have permission before they speak, even if you lay out the guidelines that this is not a classroom field, and that it's trying to create a safe environment. Sometimes they'll still need that safe, that permission to speak. Part of it too is it was the first week, so I'm sure you'll get more conversation as time goes on. On the flip side of things, if you have a group that is too talkative or that easily gets off track or whatever, or isn't paying attention, different things you can do. You can try sitting next. There's usually an instigator. You can try sitting next to that person, separate them from the person that's egging them on. So there's usually those dynamics when you have the rambunctious crowd. Making sure that you have eye contact with everybody at any given time are all good things that can help with that. But and then the last point coming out of your comments was, and also tied to yours as well, is that the reason why it isn't like we have to get through every single point is because this is a second presentation of the material to them. It's aimed at going deeper with them, so they are going to know a lot of the main overarching theme ideas and a lot of the vocabulary that goes along with this. But we want to challenge them. We want to take it deeper, which is why it's okay if this particular thing is resonating with them. Okay, let's go deeper there because they're ready for that. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
All right, awesome. Any other comments about? Yeah.
Will there be, like, the technology actually is kind of what ate up our time a little bit. So
Okay.
we did tag team where one would do one thing, one would play around with it, because we ended up having to use the TV. So we used
Okay.
the DVD player, which was fine, except that it had been so long since we had it all set up. By the time we used it, then we had to reset it all up again. So
Oh,
it kind
like
of like timed out.
It timed out.
Yeah, same here.
So
Okay.
that kind of, here we're ready to roll, we're on.
Right.
Then, okay, well, I mean, it was fine.
Yeah.
But it would have just been nice if everything.
Okay. If you can, either at the end of the meeting, write down what room you're in.
Okay.
We'll look at different options for your room. Maybe if we can see if we can get you hooked up to a projector instead, with either your laptop or one of the computers in the room, or you can shoot me an email if anybody else is having that same issue, and we'll work through that. Because technology is one of the things that can eat up your time, but it's also one of those things that can be our best friend too. So let's make sure it's our best friend. All right.
I just really lucked out, to be honest, and she's not here, so I can praise her all up and down. Laura Schroet, it was my main facilitator, and she's a teacher by trade, so she was just golden, and now I'm scared to death because I'm without her this next week, to be quite honest. But the thing that I think helped the most was she had specifically planned it out so that we literally moved everybody, like more than a couple of times, like for the Play-Doh thing.
Yeah.
She specifically made it where, like, we gave them each the Play-Doh and the paper plate, and she put them all over by themselves because they were really gabby. I was a little surprised, I guess, at how difficult it was to just keep their attention. And and yet we have a great group as
Mhm.
well, a really great group of young girls. So it's good having two people, I
Yeah.
would say, for sure.
Yeah. The good rule of thumb is you get about 1 minute of attention for every year of life.
Great.
So we're working with, right, and before you have to change your dynamic, right? I should have finished the thought here. You get about 1 minute of attention per year of life before you have to change the dynamic. So we're working with 13-year-olds. So about every 10 to 13 minutes, we need to be shifting how we're doing it or where we're doing it or something about our presentation. So whether that's physically moving, even if it's just everybody stand up, and swap chairs with somebody else or what, at least breaking it up. That's why we have video at different points. That's another way of breaking it up. Something about our presentation style has to change every 10 to 13 minutes with this age group. So, okay?
I got a funny little story about the Play-Doh. what did we give them, 10, 15 minutes to make whatever they wanted to. I forget what it was. But after about 5 minutes, they were all talking and laughing and everything else. And I said, hey, come on, guys, let's pick it up, blah, 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 blah. Little did I know, they were already done.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I didn't even realize it.
Yeah.
They had put, I mean, it's some neat stuff too.
Yeah.
So I kind of jumped on a little premature.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and that's a perfect example of learning your kids, getting to know your kids, and how, maybe the different group would need lots of time with that, because they want to be really detailed, or maybe they knew exactly what they wanted, and
Yeah, I said, guys, tell me when you've done it next time.
yeah, cool, that's great.
Well, one thing I learned too was that I have twin girls and they're very communicative with me, and so I just thought that's the way it was going to be. And so I learned that not everybody communicates the way my kids do with me, so it's a challenge for me to try to get them to open up in a different way, I guess.
Right.
So.
Yeah. And sometimes just getting the conversation going is the biggest hurdle. Just getting them to speak for the first time, right? Sometimes after kids spoke for the first or maybe second time, then you can really get the conversation going. So a couple things that can help with that. One is ask questions like, on a scale of 1 to 10, where are you with this? It's very easy for them to respond, but it's not very vulnerable. Like, they don't have to be vulnerable all of a sudden, right? Or they don't feel like it until after everybody's given, and then it's like, okay, why did you, and try and remember a couple of the kids and their answers and say, okay, Sarah, why did you say 7? Now, there was a reason why I said it, and it's connected with something that wasn't very threatening, but it allows them to go deeper with it. Another thing that's going to help us with that is they will be bringing back a worksheet every time, or they're supposed to bring back a worksheet back with them. And we're asking you guys to check on the attendance sheet. Will also be a place to check in the fact that they've done their worksheet. That can also be a great way to go ahead and get the conversation started, because they don't have to come up with the answer, it's sitting right there in front of them, right? And then you can go deeper with that. Again, just start the ball rolling. Once they've found themselves talking for a little bit, it's a lot easier to continue to talk. Okay? All right. Great. Well, thank you guys for diving into that, the unknown of the first session, and it sounds like for the most part things went well, and then we'll continue to work through the little kinks and stuff that we have along the way. Okay? All right. I wanted to jump into the second session because there is a good amount of information I want to give to you all, so that you'll kind of be able to then figure out what's going to best fit with your kids. All right? All right. Like I mentioned at the beginning, we wanted to make sure that they brought that worksheet with them, that we're checking it in. They can keep that as long as we know that, as long as we've checked it off of it, that they did it. All right. Again, you can use that as a conversation starter. That also helps them incorporate their parents into this experience. That's part of the reason. Also, part of it is to help carry over, because chances are they're not going home and doing that right away. They're doing it, probably a couple days before, or maybe the day of, and it serves as a good review. So, so that you can do that right there at the beginning. Just kind of overview of what this session is about. There, in the first line, you'll see it covers the first part of St. John Paul II's triptych vision of man. So triptych means 3 parts. John Paul II, in his work on theology of the body, talked about man in 3 different areas. He talked about original man, which was man as we were created. And when he says man here, he's not talking male. He's talking man as human, right? Triptych vision of humanity, right? Of man. So he talks about original man. So what can we gain from how we understand God and how he created us, right? So we're talking about man up until original sin, until the fall. And then he talks about historical man, which is us now living here on earth. And then he talks about what he calls eschatological man, or how we will be when we are in heaven, is what just a fancy word of saying as we will be when we're in heaven after the end of time. So this talks about that original man and his and the three original experiences you see there: original solitude, original unity, and original nakedness, which we'll talk about in a little bit more in depth when we get to it here in the lesson. But the reason this is very important in terms of our the whole curriculum as sealed in the gift is because in those very first moments we can see that we were created to be a self-gift to others. And we also see self-gift in God creating us. And that's why the session is titled Created as Gift. So you'll see down there at the bottom, opening remarks. Last year, at the beginning of each night, I did like a little intro to the night with all the kids in the main room. What we found is that used up a lot of time, too much time. I tried to keep it really short, but in the end it still ate up some time, and we want to make sure we're giving as much time to you guys in the classroom. So these opening remarks have to do with the validity of Genesis, and this is something I did myself last year, but I'm going to ask you guys to do this year. And you can either do this before or after prayer. Prayer's on the next page, wherever you feel comfortable. The reason it was before prayer is, like I said, last year it was something I did while we were all still in the multi-purpose room. But I just edited that there. So that first line, the validity of Genesis is a true event, a historical event written with metaphorical language. Okay, in our culture, there is a tendency toward saying if something is not written in factual, scientific terms, it cannot possibly describe a true event. We tend to think that way, just from our culture's perspective. We have raised science to that level of where we have a very high regard for scientific terminology and scientific fact, and rightly so, because it's leading us to a lot of great discoveries about who we are even, and cures and so on and so forth. But it does not negate the fact that we can convey truth in other ways, right? But what has happened is this led to a lot of doubt around what Genesis describes, right? And so I'll jump in right here and clarify that the church doesn't teach. There's a spectrum, right? And the church doesn't teach on either end. On one end, you have strict creationism, okay, where the earth is the sum total of the years described in the Old Testament, and that it was literally 7 24-hour days. Like, the church doesn't say that was definitely the way things were done. The church doesn't teach that. On the flip side of the spectrum, you have strict evolutionism, where there was no divine being working through creation, and that it was purely chance and survival of the fittest that led us to where we are today. Okay, those are either ends of the spectrum, and the church says the truth lies in the middle. All right, so I just wanted to get that out there first. Then where we can go with it from there is talking about Genesis as a true event written with metaphorical language. And how we, a good way of showing this to our kids is to show them that we use metaphorical language all the time to describe true events. A really good example is the way people describe their wedding days. All right? Nobody describes their wedding day by saying, at exactly 3:34, my then fiance walked 100 feet down the aisle where we exchanged circular pieces of metal, size 7 and size 8, according to ring charts, and exchanged these words of promise before walking out and sharing a life together afterwards, right? We don't talk about our wedding days like that, right? We use a lot of figurative, metaphorical language to describe our wedding days. My wife was beaming with the light of the sun, dressed in a dress shining like a star, and my smile could not be contained in all the oceans. Whatever, okay? Sorry. You're right.
I go with option one.
What? You go with option one. I'm gonna give. So this will probably work. That particular
I won't be
example.
there.
Right. My wife isn't in the room. My wife is in the room. It's a different account. All right. But we can and really do that justice, which I did not do. But if we really do that justice and we show the differences, then we can ask the question, which more completely describes what happened that day? Which more completely, and we could argue more accurately, describes what happened that day? Everybody's gonna say, well, the one using the figurative language encompasses more of the reality of what was happening to me, to my wife, to the people even there that day, more so than the factual account. All right. For the guys, we do the same thing when we talk about a great play in sports or an amazing touchdown or whatever, right? When we talk about how gracefully the kickoff return man zigged and zagged through the throng of people running all the full length of the field at the speed of light. We use figurative language when we talk about sports too, right? Because it encompasses more of the reality of what happened than if we just say at the 33-yard line he made a 6-foot cut to the left before running another 30 yards and crossing a line that is right there at the end of the field, right? We don't talk about a great play that way because it doesn't do it justice. It doesn't do justice to the reality of what it is. So you can use whichever example you feel more comfortable with, I guess, and what you think will speak to your kids. All right? But we do need to kind of hit that so that we make sure we're all on the same page going forward, because we're going to spend the rest of the evening talking about Genesis and what it implies for who we were created to be. We got prayer there at the beginning. Then we're going to we'll jump in. And again, you can, like I said, those opening remarks are there because originally it was an introduction that I did. You can move that to either before prayer where it is, right after prayer, after the gather if you want. You have some flexibility to put that in there. I would definitely do it though before we get to the explanation. So wherever you want to fit that in there, you can. All right, jumping to the gather. Guess the artist game. In your rooms, you're going to get a set of laminated copies of some major pieces of art. And there's 10 of them there. You'll have them in the room. I'd suggest spreading them out around the room. Again, an opportunity to get the kids out, get them moving, and all that. And then they're going to get an answer sheet as part of their student packet, which you have at the back of your information there, with blanks, and they need to guess by placing the number next to the artist, which artist they think did each of these works of art. So I'd suggest, it's suggested in here that you have them work on it as individuals, and then maybe, have them compare answers and see if they can figure it out a little bit more that way. And then you can sit down and you can see who got the most right or whatever, and if you want to bring in candy or something for a reward, you can do that. If not, you don't have to. That's totally up to you all.
Where's the answers?
the answers, you will also. That's a good question. That's a good question.
I probably know, but.
Yeah. You'll get the answer sheet as well. All right. Yes. Good question.
Might not know one or two.
Right. That's right. I have to. Grandma Moses is one of the artists. That one did not come up in my art class in history in college, but you'll get the answer sheet as well. And then that goes into a little bit of discussion there at the bottom of the page. It really, to get to the point of why we're doing this, is to show that each artist in his piece of in his creation does a couple things. One, he conveys a message to his audience. An artist is always conveying some sort of message through his art. And two, he is conveying something of himself in his art. So through those discussion questions, we want to kind of lead them to that realization, because that's going to tie into when we talk about Genesis and God creating us, and that he has a message for the world that he is trying to speak through us, and he also is conveying something of who he is through us. All right? Good on that one? All right. Jumping into the explanation. Okay, in the student handout again, they will have a narrative script of the second account of creation. There are two accounts of creation, the first two chapters of Genesis. They will have the account from Genesis chapter 2. It's kind of set up script style, with two narrators, a part for God and a part for Adam. So let them have fun with it. Let them pick different parts, and then you probably have some more people in the room too. Tell them, have them jump in as part of the scenery. Like they themselves or somehow create the scene that's being described as they're reading along. Just like, whatever to help them have fun with it. All right, so you could do this a couple ways. One suggested way would have them go through it like that, kind of dramatic once, go all the way through it, and then have them sit down, and then we're going to go through it a second time, and you can mix up the parts again at that point if you want, but this time not so much a dramatic reading of it as actually just reading through it, and then stopping in a couple key places to point out a few of these points that we want them to take away from this. So you'll see. So this is kind of the script again in here, with where you can stop and talk about these different things. So as we go down through, it talks about the story, the creation of heavens and earth, and how things were in the beginning, how it was lifeless. And the Lord God formed man out of the dust of the ground and blew into his nostrils the breath of life. And the man became a living being. This is the first place we want to stop because we want to talk about that phrase, breath of life. From the Hebrew word ruah, which we could really look at and see the fact, we see in the breath of God, him giving his very life to us. Giving us a share of his life. We could say this is the moment of the first soul being created, right? We share in creation in our families and bringing children into the world, but it's still always God who places the soul into our child. And that's the soul that animates our being, right? But we can see this as God, the first self-gift, right? The first self-gift of God to us, created as gift. So from the very beginning, we were a gift. And God had gifted us. He didn't have any other reason to do this. Like, he didn't need us. But he wanted to share his life. So it was a free gift of himself to us. Okay, so that's kind of the first stopping point. And then we go through the description of Eden, the Garden of Eden. And then we can kind of get down to the bottom of that, and they've gone through all these different names of the rivers and stuff, which the kids are going to have trouble with the names, and that's okay. That's all right. You know what? It's all right if they don't get the exact pronunciation down. But we do want to point to why it's there, right? And the Jews reading this would have seen in all of this the figurative language describing the temple. At Eden would have been not just a garden, but it was also a description of the temple. And the reason that that's significant is because it highlights a temple is a place where man and God meet. So the garden was symbolic of that original that original closeness we had with God. It's going to talk about in Genesis 3 how man and God walked in the garden in the evening together and talked. We had this that there was this very, very great closeness between us and God before sin entered the world. Again, we're using figurative language. Was there actually a place that was the garden? We don't know. There's some evidence to say that the Garden of Eden, the birthplace of civilization, you can hear him talk about Samaria, right, was between the Euphrates and the Tigris, which are rivers in present-day Iraq, or in my geography question. They're in the Middle East. There's, also talk about, you also may get questions like, well, is there really just original parents, Adam and Eve? Again, we're using figurative language here. Do we know that we all came from one set of parents? We don't know. There actually is some scientific evidence to support to say yes, but that's actually almost irrelevant to the fact that before sin, what Genesis is describing, the point we need to take away from this is that before sin, humanity had a closeness with God unlike none other. And then we'll also see how that was a closeness with each other, a closeness with nature, as well as a closeness to God. Okay, questions so far? I'm giving you a lot more background information than you'll necessarily need to go into with your kids. I always want to over-equip you with information and knowledge, and I really love all the seconds out of the Bible. It's amazing.
The first the Bible study we're doing right now, the Bible timeline.
Yes.
The first one is perfect for this.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. If anybody is interested, it talks about figurative language, but real events. So if anybody's interested in going into what Matt's talking about, the very first not the introduction, but the first session on Genesis for the Bible timeline, which is what WOW is doing right now, is perfect for all of this. It goes in, a few things you've said are beyond that, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I'm bouncing you against Jeff
Right.
Gibbons in my head.
But Jeff Gibbons is much more next one.
But no, seriously, it would be great, because I'm actually bummed now, because I'm not going to be here for this session.
Yeah.
John Paxton will, but it really goes into a lot of this. So if anybody's interested and knows anybody in WOW or can get a hold of the discs before next week, it goes into this quite a bit.
Yeah.
It's interesting, even just for yourself.
Yeah, definitely.
Because I learned a ton, because was it just one man, one woman? Did they have this garden, fact versus what's more important? And you can debate that endlessly.
Right.
Or get to the point, which
Yeah.
is what you just brought up.
Yeah.
What's the point of all this?
Right.
So anyway, very interesting for those who might want to do a little more.
Yeah, definitely. Always in favor of having more background to support what we're teaching our kids. So, all right. Yes, a lot to get through still. So let's go here to the next one. This is where it's going to talk about the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And now that I know I'm being bounced against Jeff K, so I'm a little bit more nervous now. But here we'll talk about why was the tree there? This is sometimes a question you'll get from the kids. It's like, well, if there hadn't been a tree of we all know that eventually Adam and Eve are going to eat from this tree, and that's going to be the original sin and fall. We're going to lose all this great unity we had with each other and nature and God, and we'll be cast out of the garden, and which is really being just cast out of that shows that division between us and God. It's like, so why was it there in the first place? Why did God have to put the tree there anyway? And it has everything to do with love. Because it has everything to do with free will. Yeah. Because it was there, it shows that we had this self-determination, that we had the ability to choose. Now, at the time, we were still free from concupiscence, this tendency towards sin. We still had the freedom to choose between right and wrong. So it's really the irony that it's called the tree of knowledge of good and evil, because we already had the ability to choose between good and evil. And it had to be there, otherwise we wouldn't have free will, and therefore we would not have love. And that was the only thing that God desired from us, was our love for him. He didn't need it, but it is what he desired, which meant he needed to give us free will. And that's symbolized here by placing the tree in the garden. Okay, next we'll jump into where God says, it is not good for the man to be alone, and he will bring all the animals before him, and Adam will find out that none will be a suitable partner for him. All right, another question I'll get is, didn't God already know this? Yes, he did know that Adam was going to look at all the animals and find out that none of them was a suitable partner for him. But there's a reason for this. And John Paul II calls this original solitude, reveals man's original solitude. Now, we hear that we were created in the image and likeness of God in Genesis, right? We'll hear that. But who is God? He is three persons. He is a communion. So from the very beginning of our creation, we had in us, because we imaged and were in the likeness of God, we also had this ache for communion, that it was not good for us to be alone, because we were created in the image of a God who was community, right? So that's kind of, I guess, the negative side of it. But original solitude isn't just a negative, though, either, and how John Paul II sees this. Solitude has a negative connotation to us in the English language, but that's not what John Paul II was going for, because we immediately attribute solitude to loneliness, right? That's what we immediately jump to. But we could all probably point to times when we are very happy to be alone. Yeah. Times when we feel like we would love to get away from our kids or love to get away from work, and we'd love to just be alone for a little while. And there's a sense of that here as well too, that in our original creation we had ability to be in solitude, not loneliness so much, but solitude. Why do we seek that out? So that we can kind of regain our focus, regain a perspective that allows us to move forward. And who was Adam alone with when he was in his solitude? He was with God, right? So oftentimes our best use of solitude is when we take that to prayer, right? Which is just communication with God. Adam had that from the very beginning in his original solitude. So original solitude is a negative in the sense that we had this ache for communion, but it's a positive in the sense that we were alone with God. There was nothing else distracting us from God. We had that aloneness with him, Like he was our only focus there. Okay, but to illustrate more of the negative side, which is what the kids are going to jump more on, we have this movie clip from the movie I Am Legend. Have you guys seen this movie? For those of you who haven't, it's a movie about there was a cure for cancer discovered, and it was administered, and it turned into a virus which wiped out 90% of the people in the world. Of the people left, let's see, that 10% was split. 9% became zombies, and 1% survived because they were immune. They had just inherent immunity to the virus. And I Am Legend follows the story of Dr. Robert Neville, played by Will Smith, and he's in New York City, which is the epicenter for this virus, right? And he's a military doctor, and he stayed when everybody else left. So he is alone in New York City, with just him and his dog. All right, and the scene that we show is he goes every so often or every day or whatever to the movie store, the video store, and he is working his way systematically through all the movies in the movie store to kill time, right? But he set up mannequins in the street, in the store, and just different places in the city, and he talks to them, and he interacts with them, and it points for our purposes, and the discussion questions that follow. Is, why was he talking to mannequins? Well, he had this thirst for communion. He had this ache to be in community. And even though he had his dog, that wasn't enough. He was still looking for more, and he couldn't fill that void, no matter how hard he tried. Okay, so then we'll jump back into Genesis. So that's a good break, right? So that's hitting our 10 or 13 minute mark, and we need to do something different with them for a little bit. All right. And then, so we jump back into Genesis, all right, and then we see the creation of Eve. So this is, and we hear Adam's response. This one at last is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. This one shall be called woman, for out of man this one has been taken. All right. We see this, so we talked about original solitude before Eve was created. Now we're going to talk about original unity between man and woman. That original unity also applies to our original unity with God, but here we're going to talk about it with man and woman. When you look at the text in Hebrew, up until now, it's been a very different word for what we translate as man. It just referred to human, right? It was kind of this neutral word. It is only after Eve is created that Adam is aware of the fact that he's male, and they use the Hebrew words ish and isha for man and woman in his response. And what we can gain from that, right, is that man knew from the beginning he was created for unity with woman, and that not just any kind of unity, but a self-gift. That he sees in his sexuality desire to give himself to the one from who was created from his very side, right? That unity is rooted in gift of himself to her, because she is at last bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. Just a little tangent point I'll put in here, because the question might come up. I wouldn't bring it up unless the kids bring it up, just because it ends up being a big tangent, right? The whole man versus woman creation thing, right? That, like every second grade or probably has the argument about, right? Who is more important because of when they were created, right? Because they're created last, does that mean they're more important or less important or whatever, right? It's very interesting because it specifically says God took a rib from Adam and built a woman from that rib. Rib is perfectly in the middle, and it's also on his side. All right. So there's a couple things that people get caught up on. One, the order in which we were created, but then also that that woman was created from man's rib. If woman had been created from a piece of man's head, we could maybe say then that would maybe point to the fact, figuratively, that woman was greater than man. If woman was created from a piece of Adam's leg or foot or something, then we can maybe make the case that it was that woman was less than man. But specifically talks about somewhere in the middle, right? And then also something from his side. Because we also get caught up on, sometimes people get caught up on the word helper, as if we see that, and again, a negative connotation of like servant or something like that. But it's more probably translated like a partner, someone alongside. And the fact that she was created from rib points to that very fact that she was to be alongside him, his equal. I wouldn't necessarily go into that unless the kids bring it up, just because it ends up being a long charged tangent. But if you feel it's appropriate, then you can certainly do that. Okay.
Hey Matt,
Yeah.
just to confirm then, when they go through this narrative,
Mhm.
as they go through this, we should be stopping as they read through it to have these discussions, or should they read through the entire thing and then we have the discussions afterwards?
Yeah, good question. I would have them read through it once with doing the more dramatic, let them get into it kind of thing, and play it out kind of like a scene. But then the second time, you're stopping them as they're reading through it. Would be my recommendation. If you have another way you want to present that, then that's fine. I'm open to that. But I think that would work out well.
So, Matt, question around the implications for our culture. The kids last time were very interested in talking about that, just kind of what we're reading versus what they're experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
Do you suggest we debrief that or not?
Yeah, I mean, anytime you can tie it to what they're experiencing in culture, I'm generally a huge fan of that, as long as it's staying on topic. Is there something you're thinking of in particular?
Well, this one on solitude, and a lot of the leadership work I do, we're talking to leaders about this very thing. We're so tied into technology and gadgets, and what we don't realize is it steals our wisdom.
Mm.
That solitude and listening to yourself and praying and spending time thinking and contemplating. We've got kids that are on gadgets 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
And so one of the things around solitude I think would be great to get them to connect to is just in our culture what takes away from that. If they're constantly stimulated,
Yeah.
they're not thinking, they're not internalizing things, using that solitude to gain wisdom.
Yeah.
So don't know if we
Mhm.
want to, connect some of that to what's really going on.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if you can get it in there, I think that's great, because even after Eve is created, John Paul will talk about original solitude still existing in what I talked about as the positive aspect of original solitude, that there was still this them being alone with God, and are we comfortable with that? Like you said. In a culture where we have all of our friends at our fingertips through whatever social media and through texting and through Skype, and we can have somebody with us and some sort of stimulation and something distracting us at any given moment if we want.
Well, it even may be more so to that as far as the things that take away from that, but what things can you do to proactively put some of that solitude back into your life, okay? Because You're not gonna take away their cell phones and their texting and all that kind of stuff. They're always gonna have that.
Right.
So, okay, at what point in time at dinner, time do you put the texting stuff away, or when you're going to bed, or how do you get some alone time with God? How do you find some of that alone prayer time? Eucharistic adoration and different things that, kids may be getting exposed to at this point, or should be getting exposed to help them cultivate that solitude that they, if they didn't make time for it, it would never occur. So that may be something to
I
try
just
to.
read an article that said that the majority of the time we are looking at a phone or a screen on a tablet or something before we go to bed. And it's one of the reasons why we're having more and more problems with sleep nowadays, is because those screens affect our minds and our brains, and we can't rest and relax and get into that deeper sleep. So I've taken my son's phone away from him. He has to lay there. And at night before he goes to bed, he's not allowed to have it. And he is sleeping better. So I need to do the same thing, I think. But I did have an article on that, and it was very interesting, where maybe, if we put it away, we get that solitude.
Yeah.
I just think it's important to connect it to what they experience.
Definitely.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that, and then when we talk, so maybe another way to relate it, when we talk about original unity, right, as that ache for communion being fulfilled, that wasn't just filled arbitrarily, right? God knew and had a plan for who was going to fill that ache for Adam, right? And that was Eve. Are we looking for the appropriate places to fulfill our need for communion and community in our life? Or are we just trying to fill it with whatever, right? Adam could have gotten to close to the end of the parade of animals and said, man, I'm running out of options here. I guess I just have to pick one, and could have settled for something less than Eve, okay? Do we do that? Do we look for the right community to belong to, in terms of our friendships, in terms of the groups that we're a part of, in terms of the conversations that we partake in? Are we finding the right community as well? You can talk about that in terms of original unity as well.
Nice.
Yeah. Okay. Again, to break up this a little bit and to, again, tie it to maybe something that they can relate to, because sometimes this expression from Adam, this one at last is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh, this one shall be called woman, for out of man this one has been taken, doesn't come across to them as the great exclamation that it would have been from Adam, right? Or the great realization and just how joyed he would have been. So a way we can do this and still be relevant is we show a clip from Tarzan, where Tarzan and Jane meet, and he realizes that they have the same hand, they put their hands together, and he realizes that they are the same. Even though they can't talk yet, even though they seem very different, he realizes that they're the same. So the discussion questions are there as well, and how he recognized both our difference and sameness at the same in that moment. He knew that she was different, but that they were basically the same thing. And we can see in that how Adam, the Ish and the Isha, that male and female, right? The difference, but still equality. Okay? All right. I gotta keep track of time here. We're running short. Okay. The man and his wife were both naked, yet they felt no shame. That last point there. Naked without shame in the context of Adam and Eve isn't the same as not caring, that they were naked, like a little kid who runs around naked in the house. Like, they just don't care, right? They know they're naked, but they don't care. That's not what we're talking about here. When we talk about original nakedness with Adam and Eve, we're talking about the fact that they only saw each other as persons, whereas now concupiscence, our wearing clothes protects us, right, from being objectified, is what John Paul II will tell us. That they were not at risk of seeing each other as a collection of body parts, or as an object to be used for my own personal pleasure or satisfaction. That they saw each other as persons always. To be, and we'll talk about later, that means the only appropriate response is love. We use objects when we love persons. All right. Okay. All right. Run through this last 2 pages here real quick. Application. Seeing beyond the labels. All right. You're also going to get in your classroom a picture of just like different pictures of people. So that kind of fit into a variety of different stereotypes. All right, and we want to show these to the kids and just ask, like, what kind of personality does this person have? All right. Try not to be shocked by their answers. Okay, you might be. I don't know what they're gonna say. Kids say some pretty amazing things sometimes, but we want to keep the conversation going, right? And the discussion we need to lead them to is are we making assumptions about who that person is just simply by what they look like and placing that label on them, because that's also a form of objectifying people rather than seeing them as persons. And this is kind of the practical application for us of that original nakedness, right? The original nakedness meant that Adam and Eve always saw each other as persons to be loved, rather than reducing each other to what they look like. Then when we talk about stereotypes, are we doing the same thing? Are we reducing somebody to simply what they look like? Now, there is a little bit of a clarification here on the next page about the fact that some people, the way they dress does speak about who they are, right? So it isn't to say that we can't learn about somebody based on how they dress, but we can't reduce them. We can't limit our view of a person based on who they are. It should only point to something greater of who they are rather than a reduction. And that's a hard point to grasp, even as adults. But a real easy way of trying to stay away from that is eliminating labels, right? And seeing what we would see as a stereotype, not as a label, but as a point of entering into knowledge about that person, and getting to know that person individually, rather than just saying, oh, you're a hippie, that I know everything about you because this is the way you dress. It's like, no, maybe that's a point where I can pick up a conversation with them, because maybe this expresses something that they're interested in. Okay, a video clip that goes with that. If you, this is one. Maybe if you're running out of time, that maybe you don't get to, or maybe you do one or the other of the video clip or this exercise. The video clip is Andrew De Leon. Does anybody know who he is? He was on America's Got Talent a couple years back, 2012, I think. And he, when you look at him, he looks like a goth rocker. And his interview leading up to his audition, that's the word I'm looking for, audition, everybody, he said he was gonna sing, and everybody just assumes that he's going to rock out. And when he starts singing, he has this amazing opera falsetto voice, and just blows everyone away, because they've already decided what he's gonna do based on how he looks. And it's really good about, to talk about, do we feel rejected? Are we more than just our label? Because sometimes we label others, and sometimes we allow ourselves to be labeled. And both are wrong. Okay? All right. Celebration is a reflection with Psalm 139. I don't have the music on the DVD. I just actually realized this the second time around. So if you have a reflective piece of music that you want to bring in with you, either on your iPhone or on your laptop or something for this exercise, that would be good. I did put one suggestion in there. If you really don't have anything, there is a suggestion in there. But their kind of time of celebration is going to be reflection on, with their baby picture, which they're supposed to be bringing with them, on what do you think God was thinking of when he created you? And what do you think he's trying to communicate through you? So I'd encourage you to read over Psalm 139, maybe pull out your favorite, like, one line out of that to go ahead and get things started in light of this context, and then have them spread out, and between reading Psalm 139, having their baby picture there, and going back to that original idea from the beginning of the artist has a message he's trying to communicate to the world through us, and he's also trying to communicate something of who he is.
Wait, that's the last part? That's what we do in the last part?
Well, we do it. We kind of hit it at both ends.
Okay.
So we're doing the artist game at the beginning
Okay.
to bring up the idea. We're showing how much God was saying through the original creation, and now we're giving them a chance to apply that to who they are, right? So walking through Genesis gives us the opportunity to say, this is all of the, not all of it, this is just part of the amazing things God was trying to tell us, and tell the world through creating us, and tell us about himself by creating us. Now let's get down to you, the fact that he created you. What is he trying to tell the world through you? What is he trying to tell you about himself through you? Realizing that we too have been created by God. All right. And then you'll also see in the materials there at the end, it's kind of some relevant pages from the Theology of the Body for Teens High School edition, which talks about those original experiences. If you want to do a little bit more reading to gain a little bit more understanding about the topic, because I admit there is a lot here. Again, not that you have to get through all the detail that we went through today. In fact, most of the extra detail we went into today is for your benefit, to kind of speak from or out of, not necessarily to speak to all of the pieces. Any questions about all of that? No? Okay. If you want to preview the videos, there's a couple ways we can do this. Last time I did not give you a copy of the DVD, and I'll explain. The reason why is I only have enough copies for each of the group. And if for some reason somebody forgot one, then we would be without video element for the evening. But if you would like to take one for your group so that you can preview the videos, because I know that's helpful as well, you can do that. I did check though, and all of the links that are in here are good, with the exception of the one on Andrew DeLeon's audition.
I didn't get that.
Yeah, so, but you can just search on Google for Andrew DeLeon audition, and there's like 20 different videos of this, essentially the same thing. but the one that we used for this is no longer available, and that's why that link didn't work, and I didn't catch it until after I'd already printed all this.
So will we not have that then for next Sunday, the Andrew,
It is on here.
oh, it is?
It's
Okay, it is on there.
I have a burn copy of it
Oh,
on here,
okay, okay, okay.
but since I burned these last year. The way YouTube goes, sometimes videos go up and they come down and all that. That particular one is no longer available on YouTube, but you can get essentially the same video on that somebody else has posted if you just search for Andrew Daly. Any other questions? So, if you want a copy of this, let me know so I know which group you're with. Otherwise, like I say, you can get those on YouTube. And if you, as you're preparing this week, if you come across any other questions, things you want to talk through, let me know.
Is this the homework sheet for them for the?
Yes. So you have a whole copy of the student materials at the back there as well.
Are you gonna have that in the room?
These will be in the room. Yes. So the DVD, the student handouts, the artist pictures, the answer key, and the pictures of the people will all be in the room waiting for you when you get here. They won't be like spread out or set up, they'll just be in the room. So if you can be here a few minutes early, just make sure the room's set up the way you want it. That would be great. All right? Everybody good? Awesome. Thank you guys so much, and thanks again for working with us.